Blood dripped from Thyra's forehead as the enraged crowd dragged her to the center of the communal hall. Stones and insults flew toward her. "Saxon witch," they shouted. "She has brought Ragnarok upon us." The slave, her hands bound and face etched with terror, looked straight at Ragnar Thorsson, the only man who could save her. Her eyes begged for mercy as the Jarl raised his hand, silencing the bloodthirsty mob. Thank you for joining this journey into the heart of Viking struggles and ancient prophecies. This channel is just beginning, and every subscription means the world to us. It helps keep this project alive as we work toward our first 1,000 followers. If you find value in these stories, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Let us know which city you're watching from. Your support is the fuel that drives us forward. The dawn broke over the rugged hills surrounding the Thorsson clan settlement, smearing the sky with pale streaks of pink and gray. A biting chill hung in the air, seeping into the bones of the land like a silent warning of the approaching winter. Frost glazed the tips of grass and the wooden beams of the longhouses, their blackened roofs still smoking faintly from the hearths inside. The scent of damp earth mixed with the sharp tang of pine needles, carried on a wind that whispered through the narrow valley. Ragnar Thorsson stood outside his dwelling, his gaze fixed beyond the encampment's borders where the dense forest rose like a wall of shadowed green. The faint light caught the strands of his unruly red hair, now threaded with silver like the bark of an ancient tree. His beard, thick and braided with bronze beads that marked his status as Jarl, caught the cold morning air with a subtle movement. 42 winters had etched lines of hardship and resolve into his face, each scar just a story of survival. He drew in a breath, tasting the crispness that foretold snow in the coming moons. The weight of leadership pressed upon his broad shoulders like the heavy cloak of wolf fur draped around him. For over a decade, he had borne the responsibility of guiding the clan through troubles, harsh winters, dwindling game, and the ever-present threat of rival clans or Christian raiders pressing from the south. Yet this morning, as he watched the village stir to life, there was a heaviness in the air that unsettled him. Not just the cold, but a deeper shadow that seemed to linger beneath the surface, a restless unease in the hearts of his people. The longhouses, made of stout timber and thatched roofs, began to hum with activity. Smoke curled from chimneys, mingling with the breath of villagers who emerged to face the day. Women wrapped in homespun wool moved swiftly, tending fires and preparing simple meals of porridge and dried fish. Children, bundled against the chill, clung to their mothers or dashed between the stacks of firewood. Men adjusted leather armor, checked weapons, and prepared for the hunting party that would set out before the sun climbed too high. Ragnar's gaze shifted to the stable where his horses neighed softly, stamping their hooves on the frozen ground. The animals were vital to the clan's survival, not only for travel, but as companions in the hunt and war. The Jarl's hands instinctively trailed over the coarse leather reins and the familiar grip of his axe's handle, resting at his waist. The weight of the weapon was a comfort, a reminder of the battles fought and those yet to come. Behind him, a faint cough broke the quiet. Svanhild, the clan's elder healer, emerged from her hut, wrapped in a thick cloak dyed a deep red, the color of dried blood and fiery autumn leaves. Her white hair was bound tightly with bone pins, and her gray eyes held the steady calm of one who had witnessed countless seasons of life and death. Her presence was a constant thread of wisdom in the chaotic tapestry of the clan's fate. "Jarl," she said, voice low but steady like the steady beat of a drum. "The sickness lingers among the children near the river. The fever has not yet broken." Ragnar's jaw tightened. Illness was a shadow that could strike without warning, and in the cold months, it could decimate even the strongest warriors. "Send word to the others," he replied. "Gather herbs. Double the watch at the river's edge. We cannot lose more before the hunt." Svanhild nodded, her breath misting in the cold as she turned away, her footsteps silent on the frost-hardened earth. Ragnar moved through the camp, his eyes sharp and his mind racing through every concern that pressed upon the clan. The recent crop failures gnawed at their stores, forcing the people to rely more heavily on the hunt and trade. Rumors spread that Christian raiders, growing bolder, had been seen along the coast with ships heavy with iron and crosses painted in black. The threat of war felt as close as the biting wind. The men preparing for the hunting party gathered near the edge of the village. Their faces were grim but determined, eyes reflecting the cold steel of their weapons and the fierceness of their pride. Among them was Gunnar Olafsson, Ragnar's lifelong friend and trusted advisor. His dark brown hair was streaked with gray, and a long scar ran along his forearm, a souvenir from a past battle with Saxon raiders. His limp was slight but constant, a reminder of sacrifice and survival. Ragnar, Gunnar said, falling into step beside him, the hunters are ready. The woods beyond the valley have been quiet, but that may change with the shifting seasons. Ragnar nodded, the lines between friendship and duty blurring in the morning light. We need every arrow and every blade sharp. The winter will test us all. They moved toward the stable, passing the low huts where the clan's slaves lived in cramped quarters. The Saxon prisoners captured during recent raids were kept under watch, but were necessary for labor. Among them was Thyra, a young woman with coal-black hair and strange, pale skin that marked her as different. She kept to herself mostly, obeying orders with quiet resignation. Ragnar had brought her back personally after the last raid, a reminder of victory, but also a reminder of the fragile balance between mercy and control. His thoughts lingered on her briefly, an uncomfortable knot tightening in his chest. The wind shifted, carrying faint sounds from the slave quarters, whispers, soft and hurried. Something unsettled fluttered in the air like a disturbed crow. Ragnar's gaze narrowed. The day had only just begun, yet the shadows seemed already to gather. He pulled his cloak tighter and turned his attention back to the horses, his strong hands checking their saddles and bridles with practiced care. The animals shifted beneath his touch, their breath steaming in the cold air. Nearby, a group of women carried baskets of dried berries and roots toward the healer's hut. Their faces were drawn, wearied by the hardships that seemed to multiply each season. Among them, a mother gently soothed a small child coughing weakly, the child's eyes glassy with fever. Ragnar's heart tightened at the sight. The strength of a leader was measured not only in battle, but in the ability to protect the vulnerable. Yet even with all his efforts, the weight of fate pressed down. He glanced toward the horizon, where the sun struggled to break through a low bank of clouds. The sky was the color of cold steel, as if the very heavens conspired against them. The heavy silence was broken suddenly by the sharp crack of a branch snapping nearby. Ragnar's hand instinctively went to the axe at his side. The hairs on the back of his neck bristled. He moved swiftly toward the sound, Gunnar following closely. Between the trees, the early light revealed the gaunt figure of a slave stumbling along the path. It was Thyra. Her face was pale, her dark hair tangled and matted, eyes wide and unfocused. Thyra, Ragnar called, stepping forward. The girl faltered, then collapsed to her knees, trembling violently. Gunnar reached out, steadying her. What is wrong? Thyra's lips moved, but the words were strange, a mix of her native Saxon tongue and something older, darker. Her eyes rolled back for a moment, and a cold sweat broke across her brow. Ragnar's grip tightened on his axe's handle. The old fear stirred in him, the fear of the unknown, of dark magic, of curses whispered by those outside their world. Svanhild arrived then, her steps brisk as she pushed through the trees. She crouched beside Thyra, dousing her face with water from a leather skin. The girl's tremors slowed, and finally, her eyes snapped open, bright and clear but filled with something otherworldly. The healer's face was unreadable for a moment. Then she looked up at Ragnar, voice low and gray. Ragnar straightened, the weight of the day pressing heavier than ever. The fire in the distance beyond the hills, the fever among the children, and now this prophecy. All threads woven into a dark tapestry he must unravel. The winds howled beyond the trees, carrying the scent of smoke and something more sinister. The coming winter held more than cold. It carried the promise of reckoning. And Ragnar Thorsson, Jarl of the Thorsson clan, would face it head-on. The night was thick with cold, the moon shrouded behind heavy clouds that swallowed the stars one by one. Ragnar stood by the outer walls of the settlement, the faint crackle of dying fires mingling with the restless murmurs of his people behind him. The weight of the recent days, illness among the children, failing crops, the haunting prophecy uttered by Thyra, pressed upon him like a stone sinking deep within his chest. His breath misted before him, each exhale a fragile thread disappearing into the darkness. He tightened his grip on the haft of his axe, the familiar roughness grounding him amidst the turmoil that churned inside. The cold wind tugged at his cloak, carrying with it the scent of the forest, the pine, damp earth, and something more unsettling, smoke. Faint but unmistakable. As he scanned the horizon, the embers of a distant fire glowed like a bleeding wound beneath the hills. The sight kindled a flicker of dread deep in his belly, the kind that whispered of death and ruin creeping closer with every passing moment. A rustle behind him drew his attention. From the shadows emerged a figure, small, cautious, and burdened with a weight that went beyond mere exhaustion. Thyra. Her dark hair hung loose, tangled and damp with the evening's chill. Her pale skin, usually marked by the grime of labor, now seemed almost translucent under the moonlight. The green of her eyes, so striking in daylight, looked haunted and distant tonight. Ragnar's jaw clenched at the sight. She limped forward, each step hesitant, as though each movement fought against an invisible force dragging her down. Thyra, he called quietly, his voice rough but steady. She stopped, turning slowly toward him. The corners of her mouth trembled, betraying a mixture of fear and pain. The fire, it's spreading faster than the wind, she whispered, voice barely audible over the night's cold breath. His eyes narrowed. Where? Near the eastern woods, she replied, her gaze lowering to the frozen ground. I saw it in my trance. Flames and shadow, swallowing everything in their path. The hunters are gone. They didn't return. Ragnar's mind raced. Losing the hunters now, just before the deep winter, was a blow they could ill afford. The clan's food stores were thin, the sick growing weaker. Every man counted. But more than that, he sensed the weight in Thyra's words, the kind that went beyond mere danger. There was desperation in her posture, a silent plea that reached past their roles as jarl and slave. He stepped closer, his voice lowering to something gentler. Why did you come here? Why now? Her eyes flickered with a raw vulnerability he hadn't seen before. Because no one else will listen. They see me as a curse, a shadow to be cast out. But the fire is real, and if it reaches us, it will bring death unlike any we have known. Ragnar studied her face, searching for deceit and finding none. The girl who had once been nothing more than a prisoner now stood before him not as a weakling, but as a bearer of truth, however unwelcome. His heart clenched, torn between the duty to protect his people and the growing unease that the prophecy was unfolding in ways he could not control. You risk much coming here alone, he said, voice low. The night is no place for the vulnerable. She swallowed hard, a flicker of strength returning to her gaze. I am no longer vulnerable. Not since the vision. I must warn you. Warn the clan before it's too late. For a long moment, Ragnar said nothing. His mind weighed the danger. To trust a slave who spoke of omens was to invite suspicion and fear. To ignore her might doom them all. The chill deepened, and the distant fire's glow pulsed like a heartbeat against the dark. Come, he finally said. We will face this together. As they turned toward the heart of the village, the sounds of restless voices grew louder. The people were uneasy, their fears fermenting like storm clouds ready to burst. Whispers of witchcraft and curses had begun to snake through the shadows. Whispered accusations aimed at Thyra. Ragnar's hand brushed against the hilt of his axe, a silent reminder of the violence that simmered just beneath the surface. Inside the longhouse, the communal hall was alive with tension. Flames from the central hearth flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock the fragile peace. Faces, lined with worry and weariness, turned toward the figures entering. Their jarl, and the girl who now carried the weight of prophecy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like a rising tide. Some eyes burned with suspicion, others with barely concealed fear. Ragnar lifted his voice, steady and commanding, silencing the room. The fire is real. It moves toward us faster than any wind. We must prepare. A woman near the front spat. It is her doing. The Saxon witch who speaks of doom brings it upon us. The accusation hung heavy in the air, poisonous and sharp. Thyra met the woman's gaze, unwavering despite the weight of hostility pressing upon her. I speak only truth, she said firmly. The gods warn us, not curse us. We must act before the darkness consumes all. The crowd's reaction was a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Fear is a cruel master. It twists truth into poison and loyalty into suspicion. Ragnar stepped forward, placing himself between Thyra and the gathering storm of accusations. She is no witch, he said with resolute authority. She bears a warning. Whether we heed it defines our fate. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the crackling fire and the distant howl of the wind outside. Svanhild emerged from the shadows then, her presence steady and commanding. Jarl, she said quietly, I have seen signs in the herbs and the stars. The balance is shifting. Thyra's vision aligns with what the gods whisper. A hush settled over the hall. Even the harshest skeptics could not ignore the healer's wisdom. Ragnar nodded solemnly. We will not waste time on blame. Prepare the hunters and warriors. Send word to neighboring clans. If the fire spreads, we must be ready. As the hall emptied, Ragnar lingered, his eyes locked with Thyra's. In that silent exchange, a fragile understanding flickered, a bond forged not in blood, but in shared fate. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of smoke sharper now, closer. The choice lay before him, to step forward into the unknown with this girl by his side, or to retreat behind walls of fear and tradition. Ragnar's gaze hardened with resolve. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but in Thyra's eyes, he saw not a slave, but a warrior of fate. And sometimes, he knew, the greatest strength came from embracing the unexpected, even when it threatened to unravel everything. Together, they stepped into the night, ready to face the coming storm. The fire's glow had faded into a distant, haunting ember by the time Ragnar led Thyra away from the restless flickers of the unsettled camp. The night had grown colder, the wind sharper, as if the very air whispered warnings that no words could capture. The long shadows cast by the torches flickered against the rough wooden walls of his dwelling, where warmth and shelter waited like a fragile reprieve against the dark. Inside the small cabin, the heavy scent of pine and smoke mingled with the earthy aroma of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. Ragnar moved with practiced ease, setting down his cloak and loosening the fur lining to reveal the broad frame beneath, scarred and weathered by years of battle and hardship. His eyes never left Thyra as he gestured toward the hearth, where embers still smoldered faintly. Sit, he said softly, his voice rough but calm. You need warmth. Thyra, her body stiff and trembling, obeyed with a hesitant nod. The chill clung to her like a second skin, and the heavy cloak draped around her shoulders did little to stem the shivers that racked her frame. Her dark hair hung loose now, strands clinging damply to pale skin marked by the toils of servitude. The faint "Let me see," she said gently, moving toward Thyra. The young woman flinched, but did not resist. Svanhild's hands were deft and sure as she examined the cut on Thyra's forehead, carefully wiping away the dried blood with a cloth soaked in warm water. The skin beneath was pale, almost translucent, a stark contrast to the dark stains of old wounds and dirt. "This will heal," Svanhild assured, mixing a paste of crushed herbs, their bitter scent filling the room. She applied it carefully, humming an old tune, a lullaby of sorts, carried down through generations. Thyra's breathing slowed, the tension easing from her shoulders. Ragnar watched, the hard lines of his face softening. This girl, once nothing more than a captured slave, now held a strange power over him, a mixture of fear, admiration, and something deeper he could not yet name. "Tell me," he said quietly once Svanhild had finished, "what is it you truly see? This vision, what does it mean for us?" Thyra's eyes, bright and clear despite exhaustion, met his. In them was a depth that belied her years, a flicker of something ancient and sorrowful. "Ragnarok is not just the end," she whispered, her voice barely above the crackling fire. "It is a breaking and a becoming. The old world will fall, but from its ashes a new one will rise. We stand on the edge of the storm." The words hung between them, heavy with portent. Ragnar's mind wrestled with the weight of prophecy, torn between the leader's pragmatism and the man's hope. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of smoke and fear. But inside the cabin, time seemed to slow, a fragile bubble of quiet amidst the chaos. Thyra shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away for a moment before returning to hold Ragnar's gaze. "You saved me from the crowd, from their stones and anger." Ragnar gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "I did what was right. You are not a curse, but a warning." Their eyes locked in a silent exchange, a moment of understanding forged in the crucible of shared danger. The barriers of master and slave, of Saxon and Norse, seemed to blur, replaced by a tentative bond born of necessity and mutual respect. Svanhild cleared her throat softly, breaking the stillness. "She is stronger than she seems. The gods work in strange ways." Ragnar looked toward the healer, then back to Thyra. "You will stay here. Rest. When dawn comes, we will decide what comes next." Thyra nodded, a faint glimmer of relief crossing her features. For the first time since her arrival, she allowed herself to relax, the weight of suspicion momentarily lifted. As the fire's warmth seeped into their bones, the silence returned, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken promises and the fragile hope that even in the darkest nights, light could be found. The sun hung low and heavy over the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the frozen earth, like dark fingers reaching for the heart of the village. The chill in the air was relentless, a biting reminder that winter's grip tightened with every passing day. Inside the longhouse, the communal hall was alive with restless murmurs, voices heavy with unease, eyes darting toward the door as if expecting the walls themselves to whisper warnings of the approaching storm. Outside, the word had spread like wildfire through the tangled forests and rocky hillsides. The Saxon slave who spoke of Ragnarok had not only survived the rage of the clan, but had fought alongside the Jarl himself. Thyra, once a shadow in the background of the camp, was now a beacon, a symbol that unsettled more than it inspired. The news had reached neighboring clans, whispering fears and curiosity in equal measure. Ragnar stood by the entrance, his broad frame silhouetted against the dying light. His blue eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the crowd before him. Faces, some familiar, others strange, were etched with worry and suspicion. The elders debated in low tones, while warriors shifted uneasily, fingers twitching near the hilts of their weapons. The clamor of voices surged like the tide, swelling and receding, but always returning to the same thorny subject, Thyra. A tall man stepped forward, a messenger from the neighboring clan of Eriksson, sent under the banner of peace, yet carrying the weight of an unspoken threat. His weathered face was lined with cold and calculation, his dark eyes gleaming with the cunning of a seasoned warrior. "Jarl Ragnar," he began, voice steady but firm. "Word of Thyra's role in the recent defense has reached us. Such an event cannot be ignored." He paused, measuring his words. The clans watched closely. To harbor a slave who speaks of the end times and fights beside her master is to invite suspicion and peril. Ragnar's jaw tightened, the familiar tension rising like a storm cloud gathering over the mountains. "Thyra is no threat to the clan. She stood with us when steel sang and blood was spilled. Her visions may unsettle, but her loyalty is without question." The messenger's eyes flickered, a shadow of doubt crossing his features. Loyalty or deception? The gods do not take kindly to those who bring ill omens. The balance between worlds is delicate. To ignore such signs risks the wrath of the Aesir. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd, some nodding with agreement, others scowling in defiance. Ragnar's hand instinctively rested on the haft of his axe, the weight a steady anchor against the rising tide of unrest. "Fear breeds enemies within," he said, voice low and commanding. "We face threats from without. Hraftsson still roams these hills, their hatred like poison in the blood. We will not turn on one of our own, not without cause that stands beyond whispers." The messenger's gaze hardened. "Then prepare yourselves, Jarl. The clans will watch your every move. Should Thyra's presence bring harm, the blame will fall upon your shoulders." As the man's footsteps retreated, leaving a trail of frost in his wake, the hall's atmosphere thickened with tension. Whispers resumed, shadows lengthening in the flickering firelight. Some spoke of curses, others of fate, all of it tangled in a web of fear and uncertainty. Ragnar turned toward the hearth where flames licked the darkened timber. He could feel the weight of the clan's expectations pressing down, the fragile balance between hope and dread shifting beneath his feet. His gaze found Thyra's across the room, her green eyes steady, defiant, yet shadowed by the burden she carried. Later, beneath a sky smeared with bruised clouds, Ragnar met with Gunnar in the quiet seclusion of the stable. The scent of leather, sweat, and animals mingled with the cold night air. Gunnar's face was grave, the usual calm in his eyes tempered by concern. "The clans are restless," Gunnar said, voice low. "They speak of omens and curses, and Thyra has become a symbol of both. Some see her as a witch, others as a warning from the gods. Neither is safe." Ragnar nodded, tracing the worn lines of his axe's haft. "We cannot abandon her. Not now. But I fear the danger is no longer just from Hraftsson or the bite of winter." Gunnar's gaze darkened, the weight of unspoken threats hanging between them. "The Irixan messenger warned us. They will test our resolve, watch for weakness. If they decide Thyra is a danger, it may not be just words thrown in the fire." The wind whispered through the cracks of the stable walls, carrying with it the distant cries of wolves. Ragnar's mind raced, calculating risks and alliances. The burden of leadership never felt heavier. Back in the village, Thyra moved among the people, her steps careful yet purposeful. The transformation from slave to free woman was marked not only by the clothes she wore, but by the wary respect etched into the faces that met hers. Some eyes held suspicion, others grudging acceptance. Still, many avoided her gaze altogether. She stopped by the fire where children huddled, their cheeks flushed with cold and fever. Kneeling, she reached out, her hands gentle as she offered a piece of dried meat to a trembling boy. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the walls of prejudice seemed to crack, revealing the fragile humanity beneath. But the shadows of doubt lingered like a cold fog. Whispers followed her footsteps, questions about the nature of her visions, fears of the curse she supposedly carried. Mothers clutched their children tighter when she passed. Men lowered their voices in her presence. One evening, as the winds howled against the wooden walls of the healer's hut, Svanhild and Thyra sat by a flickering oil lamp. The old woman's hands trembled slightly as she prepared a salve, but her eyes were sharp, unwavering. "The world outside grows darker," Svanhild said, voice gravelly but steady. "The clans are restless, and the gods speak in riddles more often now. Your visions, they are not simple warnings. They are threats, yet even as he spoke, the doubt in the eyes around him lingered. Thyra's prophecy was a heavy mantle, one that divided as much as it united. In the nights that followed, shadows deepened. Silent watchers appeared at the edges of the village, men with faces hidden beneath dark hoods, their intentions unknown. Rumors whispered of spies sent by rival clans, watching for a moment of weakness. Ragnar found himself torn. His duty was to protect his people, to keep the village safe from fire and steel alike. But his heart pulled him toward Thyra, whose fate was intertwined with the fragile thread of their survival. One evening, beneath a sky veiled in cold starlight, Ragnar confronted the council of elders. Their faces were etched with worry, their voices laced with fear and tradition. You risk the clan's honor by sheltering one who carries the word of doom. One elder accused, voice trembling. The gods demand purity. We cannot harbor a curse. Ragnar's gaze was steel. I will not let fear dictate our fate. Thyra fought for this clan with sword and spirit. To cast her out now would be to shatter what little unity remains. Murmurs swelled, but hesitation slowed the tide of dissent. The elders exchanged glances, their wise eyes reflecting the weight of hard decisions. Later, Ragnar sought Thyra in the quiet of the longhouse's upper chamber. The flickering firelight danced across her face, revealing the fatigue beneath her fierce gaze. You carry a burden no one asked for, he said quietly, but you are no longer alone. Thyra's lips curved in a faint, tired smile. I feared I was doomed to walk this path alone. But your trust, it is a light in the darkness. Beyond the walls, the night deepened, carrying with it the chill of coming storms, both of weather and war. The world was changing, and the fragile peace of the Thorsson clan hung in a delicate balance between survival and ruin. In the days to come, the whispers would grow louder, alliances would be tested, and the line between friend and foe would blur beneath the shadow of prophecy. Yet through it all, the bond between Ragnar and Thyra would be a beacon, an uncertain hope in a world poised on the edge of Ragnarok. And as the cold wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the scent of ash and snow, the clan braced itself for the trials yet to come, knowing that the end was never a simple thing, but the beginning of something far greater. The longhouse swelled with restless murmurs, voices rising and falling like the crash of distant waves. The firelight flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows across the rough timber walls, distorting faces and fears alike. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks, carrying the scent of smoke and the threat of coming storm. The entire settlement seemed to hold its breath, caught in the tension twisting tight around every heart. Ragnar stood at the threshold of the great hall, shoulders squared but eyes heavy with the weight of what was to come. His gaze swept the crowd, warriors gripping weapons tightly, elders whispering prayers, mothers clutching children close. Their faces were etched with a mixture of dread and anger, suspicion simmering beneath the surface like embers ready to ignite. At the center, bound and bruised, stood Thyra. Her once pristine linen was stained with dirt and blood, her hands tied with rough hemp cords that bit into her wrists. The fresh cut across her brow still bled, trickling down in slow, dark rivulets. Yet her green eyes blazed defiantly, unbowed by the crowd's fury or the cold that gnawed at her skin. Which, someone spat from the back, voice sharp and venomous. She has cursed us all. Ragnarok is upon us because of her. Another cried, stepping forward, face flushed with rage. The wolves will break free, the serpent will rise, and it's her dark magic that called them. The hall erupted into shouts, fists pounding against wooden benches, voices clashing in a storm of fear and blame. The air thickened, heavy with smoke, sweat, and the bitter taste of desperation. Ragnar raised his hand, the gesture slicing through the chaos like a blade. Silence. His voice boomed, commanding and resolute, reverberating against the rafters. Slowly, the crowd stilled, the storm of anger momentarily held at bay by the force of his will. He stepped forward, each footfall measured and deliberate, until he stood before Thyra. The firelight danced in his blue eyes, sharp and unwavering. "Enough," he said, voice low but clear. "She is no witch. She speaks a warning we would do well to heed." A murmur rippled through the gathered throng, some skeptical, others grudgingly respectful. But the anger had not fully abated. It hovered, like a vulture waiting for weakness. From the shadows at the back of the hall, a figure emerged, a man draped in dark furs, his presence commanding and cold. Ragnar Sigurdsson, leader of the rival clan, stepped into the flickering light. His black hair, slick and unkempt, framed a face carved with cruelty and cunning. His eyes, so dark they seemed almost void, scanned the room with predatory precision. "Jarl Ragnar." Ragnar's voice cut through the tense silence like a sharpened sword. "Your hospitality toward this Saxon slave has weakened your clan. Your people are divided, your enemies emboldened." He gestured toward Thyra, disdain curling his lip. "You shelter a harbinger of ruin, a woman who weaves doom with her words and deeds." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd at the sight of Ragnar. His reputation for brutality and cunning was well known, one not easily ignored. Yet Ragnar met his gaze without flinching, the fire in his soul kindling brighter. "This is no time for petty accusations, Ragnar replied, his tone steady and unyielding. "We face a threat far greater than old grudges and clan rivalries. Our enemies circle like wolves in the night, and it is unity that will see us through." Ragnar laughed, a sound harsh and bitter. "Unity? You poison your people with fear and superstition. You let a slave dictate your fate, and now you invite your enemies to feast on your weakness." The tension snapped like a taut bowstring. Men in the hall gripped their weapons tighter, some stepping forward, ready to defend their jarl or to challenge the intruder. The air crackled with the promise of violence. Ragnar raised his hand again, signaling for calm. "We will not be torn apart from within. Those who seek to divide us will find no victory here." He turned back to the crowd, voice rising with commanding authority. "The prophecy is not her fault. The fires on the hills burn because of men's ambitions and hatred. The sickness among our children is no curse, but a trial. We must face these challenges as one, not as enemies quarreling over shadows." Despite Ragnar's words, whispers of doubt clung stubbornly to the edges of the gathering like winter frost. The people's fear was a living thing, twisting and turning, shaped by ancient beliefs and recent misfortunes. Ragnar stepped closer to the center, eyes locked on Thyra. "Will you stand beside this woman, Ragnar? Will you let her visions dictate your sword's path?" Ragnar's gaze hardened. "I will stand beside those who fight for the clan's survival. Thyra has bled with us, fought with us. Her courage is the proof the gods demand." Suddenly, a hush fell. The sound of hooves thundering against frozen earth shattered the fragile peace. Warriors at the edge of the hall turned sharply toward the doorway, weapons drawn. The outer doors burst open, and a breathless scout staggered inside, snow clinging to his cloak, face pale and eyes wide with alarm. "Jarl, the Hraftson warband moves fast, less than an hour away. They come with fire and steel. We must prepare or perish." The hall erupted anew, a surge of adrenaline electrifying the air. Some men shouted calls to arms, others cursed under their breath. The weight of impending battle pressed down on every soul present. Ragnar's eyes locked with Thyra's. "This is the moment. You fight with us. Show the clan your true spirit." Despite the pain from the cut on her brow, despite the exhaustion that clung to her bones, Thyra nodded once, resolute. "I will not flee. I will stand where my fate demands." The crowd parted as Ragnar stepped forward, freeing her bindings with swift, practiced hands. The cords fell to the dirt floor, and as the battle thundered on, the clash of clans echoed through the valley, carrying with it the promise that even when the world seemed destined to end, new beginnings could rise from the ashes. The battle had left the valley in a heavy silence, broken only by the distant cries of ravens and the low groans of the wounded. The snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting down to blanket the bloodied earth and the shattered remnants of the conflict. The air was cold, biting like the steel that still stained the hands of the survivors. Ragnar Thorsson sat upon a fallen tree near the edge of the camp, his broad shoulders sagging beneath the weight of exhaustion and relief. His blue eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were clouded with fatigue. The scars of the day were etched in his flesh and soul alike. Around him, the clan moved slowly, gathering the bodies of their fallen, tending to the injured, and trying to make sense of the chaos that had erupted so violently just hours before. At his side, Thyra leaned against the rough bark of the tree, her breathing steady despite the pain that throbbed in her wounded shoulder. The cloth she pressed against the gash was darkened with fresh blood, but her green eyes burned with a quiet fire, a fire that had not been there before, or perhaps one that had been hidden beneath years of silence and fear. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them had grown still, as if holding its breath after the storm of steel and fury. The distant sky blushed with the faint light of dawn, a pale promise of a new day. Ragnar finally broke the silence, his voice low but carrying the grave weight of a man who had seen too much. "You saved me today. Not many could stand where you did." Thyra's lips curved in a faint, tired smile, but there was no arrogance in it, only a deep, weary understanding. "I had to," she said quietly, "because if you fall, the clan falls. And if the clan falls, so does any hope we have." He looked at her then, really looked, seeing not the slave brought in chains months ago, but a warrior forged in fire and fear. The cut on her forehead still bled faintly, a mark of the hatred she had borne, but now it seemed less a wound and more a badge, a symbol of survival. "Why did you fight so fiercely?" Ragnar asked. "You could have fled when the others ran, but you stayed." Her eyes darkened with memories of a past that felt both distant and near. "Because running is not always an option. Because fear is a chain heavier than any rope. Because," she paused, searching for words that could carry the weight of her truth. "Because I needed to prove that I am more than what they said I was." Ragnar nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken burdens she carried. The clan had turned on her, blaming her for curses and misfortunes, yet here she was, standing stronger than many who had been born free. The truth was clear, even if the people had yet to see it fully. "You are no curse," he said firmly. "You carry the blood of two worlds, but your spirit belongs here, with us." A quiet determination filled Thyra's gaze. "Then I will fight, for this clan, for those who believed in me, and for those who did not yet know they could." The sounds of the clan's recovery echoed around them. Svanhild moved among the wounded, her hands steady and sure as she applied salves and whispered prayers to the gods. Gunnar Olafsson was busy organizing the hunters to patrol the borders, ensuring that no further threat would catch them unprepared. The men and women moved with a renewed sense of purpose, the sting of recent loss tempered by the hope born of survival. Ragnar rose from the tree, the stiffness in his joints a reminder of the years he carried. He looked toward the longhouse, where the survivors would gather to honor those who had fallen. The great hall stood solid against the cold, its wooden walls a shield against the darkness that sought to swallow them. "Come," he said to Thyra, offering his arm. She accepted, wincing slightly but steadying herself. Together, they walked back towards the heart of the clan. Inside the longhouse, the fire burned bright, casting warm light on faces etched with sorrow and gratitude. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, sweat, and the faint tang of blood. Elders sat in their places of honor, their eyes heavy but attentive. The warriors who had survived leaned on each other, some silent, others speaking in low tones of the battle's turning points. Thyra's presence was met with a mixture of stillness and guarded glances. Some eyes widened in surprise at her transformation, from captured slave to respected fighter. Others remained wary, the old fears slow to fade. Ragnar raised his voice, steady and commanding, breaking through the murmurs. Tonight, we honor not just the fallen, but those who fought to keep us standing. Thyra stood with us when the world threatened to break apart. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the hall. The elders exchanged looks, some approving, others uncertain. Yet the seeds of change had been planted. Gunnar stepped forward, his scarred hand extended toward Thyra. In it, he held a simple silver bracelet, etched with runes of protection and strength, a symbol of acceptance and belonging. For courage, Gunnar declared, and for loyalty beyond blood. Thyra took the bracelet with hands that trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. She fastened it around her wrist, the cold metal against her skin a reminder that she was no longer bound by chains, but by honor. As the night deepened, stories were told, of valor, loss, and the fragile hope that they would see the next spring. The clan, though battered and bruised, was united once more. The walls that suspicion and fear had built were beginning to crumble, replaced by cautious trust. Later, when the hall had emptied and quiet settled like a soft blanket over the settlement, Ragnar and Thyra found themselves alone beneath the stars on the cliff overlooking the sea. The dark waters stretched endlessly before them, waves crashing against the rocks below with a steady, timeless rhythm. Thyra's gaze was distant, reflecting the vastness of the ocean and the unknown future. "Do you believe the prophecy still holds?" she asked softly. "That Ragnarok is coming?" Ragnar's eyes searched the horizon, where the first light of dawn softened the edges of night. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I have learned this. Fate is not a chain, but a path, and we choose how we walk it." She nodded, the weight of her visions settling into a quiet resolve. "Then we face whatever comes, together." He reached out, his hand brushing the crescent-shaped birthmark on the nape of her neck, a silent acknowledgement of her past and her strength. Together, the wind carried the scent of salt and pine, the cold softened by the promise of morning. In that moment, two souls, shaped by different worlds but bound by shared fate, stood side by side, ready to face the storms ahead. The fire of conflict had tested them, but it had also forged a new beginning. And in the shadow of Ragnarok's prophecy, the Thorsson clan found not despair, but hope. Because sometimes, endings are only the beginning. The first light of dawn crept gently over the ridge, casting soft hues of orange and rose across the frost-kissed fields that surrounded the village. The air was crisp and still, the deep silence of morning broken only by the faint stirrings of life awakening. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys as the clan began to prepare for another day. A day that felt somehow different, heavier with the weight of recent events, yet lighter with a subtle promise of renewal. The longhouse stood at the village's heart, its sturdy beams weathered by countless storms yet resolute, a symbol of endurance and community. Around it, the scattered cabins and workshops bore the marks of a people who had survived hardship and strife, who had been tested by fire and blood and had not broken. Today, they moved with a quiet purpose, tending to wounds both seen and unseen. Ragnar Thorsson walked through the settlement with a measured step, his eyes surveying his people not as a distant leader, but as one of them, worn by battles and seasons alike. His red hair, now more silver than flame, caught the soft sunlight, and the familiar weight of his axe rested against his hip, a constant companion and reminder. It was in moments like this, after the tumult had passed, that the true work of a jarl began. healing. Not just the bodies marked by blade and arrow, but the hearts scarred by fear and suspicion. His gaze found Thyra as she moved among the villagers. Thyra looked up, meeting his eyes. There was no need for words to affirm what had been won through sweat and blood. Between them lay an unspoken bond, forged not by lineage or birthright, but by shared trials and the will to endure. Around the village, the work of rebuilding was underway. Men repaired broken fences and reinforced the palisades, their movements tired but determined. Women gathered to prepare meals, their voices weaving stories of the past with hopes for the future. The elders convened quietly, their faces lined with the wisdom of years and the weight of difficult decisions. Svanhild moved among them, her hands steady as ever, offering salves and counsel. Though age had claimed some of her strength, her spirit remained unyielding, the guiding light in a time of uncertainty. She paused beside Ragnar and Thyra, her gaze lingering on the young woman whose presence had shifted the course of the clan's fate. The threads of the past and present are entwined in ways even the gods may not foresee, Svanhild mused softly. But there is power in those who carry both worlds within them. Her words echoed the truth that had slowly taken root among the people. Fear was a force that could shatter, but hope could build anew. In the days that followed, the stories of the battle and the prophecy spread beyond the valley. Neighboring clans spoke in hushed tones of the Saxon slave who had become a warrior, the woman who bore the weight of ancient visions, yet chose to fight for those who once scorned her. Some met this news with skepticism, others with grudging respect. The fragile peace between clans remained delicate, but the seeds of change had been sown. Within the village, new traditions began to emerge. In the evenings, as firelight flickered against the longhouse walls, the clan gathered not only to honor the fallen, but to share tales of courage in the face of the unknown. Stories of Thyra's bravery were woven alongside those of ancestors and gods, a testament to the complexities of fate and the resilience of the human spirit. Children learned not just the old sagas, but also the lessons of acceptance and unity. The boundaries between Norse and Saxon, between slave and free, blurred in the light of common struggle. A new generation grew up knowing that strength came not from birthright alone, but from the choices one made when the world was on the brink. One morning, as the village bustled with activity, a figure stood at the edge of the forest. A rider, cloaked and hooded against the chill, paused to survey the settlement. The wind tugged at the edges of his cloak, carrying the scents of pine and earth. His eyes, sharp and steady, held the wisdom of many journeys. It was Einar, a scout from a distant clan, sent to forge alliances in uncertain times. He approached the longhouse, where Ragnar and Thyra stood speaking quietly. His presence was a reminder that the world beyond their valley was vast and full of both promise and peril. Jarl, Einar greeted with a respectful nod. News travels swiftly. Your deeds and the courage of your people have reached far beyond these hills. Ragnar's gaze was steady, his voice humble yet proud. We fight not for glory, but to protect what we hold dear. The future is uncertain, but we face it together. Einar's eyes flickered toward Thyra, who stood beside the Jarl with quiet strength. A new chapter begins, it seems. Your clan's story is changing. As the scout turned to rest by the fire, Ragnar and Thyra shared a glance. A silent acknowledgement of the path they had walked and the road still ahead. Later that evening, beneath a sky heavy with stars, the village gathered for a feast unlike any before. The longhouse brimmed with warmth and light, its walls echoing with laughter and song. For the first time in many moons, the air was free of suspicion and fear, replaced by a tentative hope. Ragnar raised a horn filled with mead, his voice carrying over the crowd. Tonight, we honor those who fought and those who dared to believe in a future beyond the shadow of doom. Let us remember that even in the darkest times, The flame of courage can never be extinguished. Thyra stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sword. Around her wrist, the silver bracelet caught the firelight, a sign of belonging and transformation. As the evening deepened, stories were told of gods and men, of battles lost and won, of endings that birthed new beginnings. The clan's song rose in unison, a melody of life, loss, and the enduring power of hope. In the quiet that followed, Ragnar and Thyra stepped outside to the cliff's edge, where the sea stretched endlessly beneath the moon's pale glow. The waves crashed relentlessly against the jagged rocks, a timeless rhythm of destruction and renewal. She turned to him, her breath visible in the cool night air. "Do you think the prophecy will come to pass?" Ragnar's gaze held the horizon, where the first hints of dawn painted the sky with soft light. "Perhaps, but fate is not fixed. It is shaped by those who dare to fight, to change, and to believe." Thyra nodded, a calm settling over her. "Then we will face it, as we always have. Together." Their hands found each other in the darkness, a quiet promise passing between them. The world beyond was uncertain, shadowed by threats both ancient and new. But within the heart of the clan, a fire burned steady, a fire born of courage, of kinship, and of the belief that even the end could be a beginning. And so the saga of the Thorsson clan continued, woven into the vast tapestry of time, where the echoes of Ragnarok whispered not just of doom, but of transformation and hope. The wind carried their voices across the cliffs, a song for the ages, fierce, enduring, and alive. The night settled over the Thorsson clan's settlement like a heavy shroud, thick with the remnants of battle and the echoes of fear. The fires that once illuminated the village now burned low, their orange tongues casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the frozen ground. The bitter wind whispered through the skeletal trees, carrying with it the scent of ash and cold earth, a subtle reminder that the world was both ending and beginning anew. Ragnar stood alone by the edge of the cliff, the vast sea stretching before him, its waves crashing relentlessly against the jagged rocks below. The salt-laden air stung his skin, mingling with the cold that had settled deep in his bones. His breath formed fleeting clouds in the night, each exhale a fragile testament to life amidst the encroaching darkness. The weight of leadership, of prophecy, and of survival pressed heavily upon him, a burden worn as unmistakably as the scars etched into his flesh. Behind him, the longhouse stood silent, a fortress of timber and stone that had sheltered his people through countless storms. Yet even its sturdy walls could not keep out the uncertainty that now crept through their hearts like a shadow. His gaze drifted back to the village, where flickering torches marked the slow, careful movements of his kin. Faces once filled with suspicion now held a flicker of something else, tentative acceptance, perhaps even hope. Thyra moved among them, her presence no longer a cause for whispered curses, but a symbol of resilience. The silver bracelet gleamed faintly on her wrist, catching the firelight like a promise. Ragnar's thoughts turned to her, the girl who had once been bound by chains and fear, now a warrior standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, held the weight of visions she neither sought nor welcomed. Yet she carried them with a quiet dignity that challenged the very roots of their traditions. He remembered the moment when he first heard her prophecy. The words had struck like thunder in a clear sky. Fenrir breaking his chains, Jormungandr rising from the depths, fire and ice consuming the world. At the time, such visions might have been dismissed as the ramblings of a frightened slave. But now, standing on the precipice of uncertainty, the truth of those images lingered in the air like smoke. Still, Ragnar refused to be broken by fear or fate. The gods might have woven a tapestry of endings, but within its threads lay the possibility of new beginnings. His people had faced death before, in battle, in the harshness of winter, in sickness that ravaged even the strongest. Each time, they had endured, rising from the ashes with a fierce resolve. He glanced for a long moment. They stood together, watching the restless sea beneath the vast expanse of night. The stars glittered cold and distant, unchanging witnesses to the fragile hopes of mortals. In that silence, a quiet understanding blossomed. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to confront it. Ragnar's voice broke the stillness. The road ahead will be hard. The clans beyond these hills will watch us closely, some with suspicion, others with envy. But we have forged something here, not just strength, but trust. Thyra's lips curled into a faint smile. And that trust will be our shield against the darkness to come. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of black hair from her face, fingers lingering at the curve of the crescent birthmark on her neck, a mark that spoke of both past sorrows and future promise. Whatever the gods have planned, he said, we will face it as one. Her hand found his, firm and warm against the cold. Together, the wind picked up, carrying the distant call of a raven, a messenger between worlds, ancient and eternal. It circled above, its wings casting fleeting shadows over the frozen earth, before vanishing into the night. Ragnar took a deep breath, the sharp air filling his lungs, reminding him that life persisted even in the harshest winters. The old world might tremble, might shatter beneath the weight of prophecy, but from its ruins, something new would arise. He turned back to the village, where the flickering torches now burned brighter, defiant against the dark. The faces of his people were etched with lines of hardship, but also with the stubborn fire of survival. Tonight, he whispered to no one but the night itself, we remember that endings are never the end. They are but the beginning of a story yet to be told. Thyra leaned her head against his shoulder, their breaths mingling in the cold air. Neither spoke, for words were unnecessary. In that moment, the future stretched out before them, uncertain, wild, and full of possibility. The saga of the Thorsson clan would continue, its pages written by those brave enough to defy fate and forge their own path. Fear might howl like the winter wind, but hope would burn like a steady flame in the hearts of those who dared to believe. As the first stars faded into the approaching dawn, Ragnar and Thyra stood together, guardians of a fragile peace and witnesses to the eternal dance between destruction and renewal. The saga was far from over, but in that quiet night, amid the firelight and the shadows, they understood this truth. In the heart of darkness, courage is the light that never dies. If you journeyed with us through this tale, carry its lessons close. For in the stories of old, we find reflections of our own struggles and hopes. Until the next chapter unfolds, may your spirit remain unbroken and your heart open to the possibilities that lie beyond the horizon. Subscribe, share, and return with us to the echoes of the past, where fear meets hope and endings give way to beginnings. Because in the saga of life, every ending is but a new dawn waiting to rise.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting started and we really need your support. And may the gods grant you a legendary life.